Hello, today we're doing a drawing of Geralt the Witcher, portrayed by Henry Cavill. Let's have a look. I'm mostly going to be using charcoal again, as usual. The sketch is mostly done with an HB graphite pencil, as usual. In addition to commenting on the drawing process, I'm also going to be talking a little bit about The Witcher. I have to admit up front that I haven't seen the series yet, and I haven't read the books, so there you have it. I only played the original game, the first one. I didn't play the second or the third game, even though they were well received by both the critics and the gamers. I did think that the original game was really good, one of the best role-playing games I've ever played. It had a great atmosphere, great stories, great plot, and it felt almost like you were watching a movie, or like you were in a movie. That was something special about that game. And I'm sure that the TV series and the books are also pretty good. Now, as for what I'm doing right now, I'm working on the background, but I also drew the hilt of the sword because I'm gonna want some of the metallic shiny parts of that sword to stand out against the background, so I decided to create some contrast there, and I'm gonna clean up those edges so that they are cleaner and nicer. And as for the background, I'm mostly doing that with a piece of vine charcoal, in case you can't see what I'm doing. It's not a compressed charcoal stick, it's not a charcoal pencil, it's just a piece of vine charcoal. And because it's so soft, it allows me to work freely and modify everything as I go along. So I decided to simplify the background a little bit. I wanted to create a feeling like he's in a forest, like there are lots of trees, coniferous trees. So I tried to do my best to render that with vine charcoal, because vine charcoal is pretty good for that. I find that you can draw tree canopies and branches very quickly with very few strokes. But it was important for me to get in some of that background so that some of these highlights and lighter parts would stand out, like for example that sword, the hilt of the sword, or witch's hair, which is mostly white or almost white. So I need contrast between the background and the head and the sword so that these things would stand out. And as you can see in the background, by the way, I'm now moving on to the face, and I'm going to do my best to achieve likeness with Henry Cavill, because I decided to draw from a reference photo from the TV series, and I think that Henry was a good choice for The Witcher. Well, a decent choice. As for the background, as you can see, I decided to try to create some depth in that forest. That's why some of the trees are better defined and others kind of blurry. So the ones that are closer to us are better defined, and there's more contrast and some cleaner edges, and the ones in the back, they're kind of fading and they're less defined and blurred out. This is an effect that I often use when drawing trees and forests in order to create an illusion of depth and distance. Like some trees are in front of the others, and like there are a lot of trees there. I'm also using a combination of my vine charcoal and tortillions to create those branches of trees with some clusters of needles on them. As for the face, in addition to a charcoal pencil, I had to use a black colored pencil as well. This is a combination that I regularly use in all of my drawings, or in most of my charcoal drawings, especially when there are portraits involved, because I like to use some of the advantages of a black colored pencil to complement my charcoal pencils, and they just help me work on the facial features and some of the details on the face and on the skin, of the texture of the skin and things like that. So I think that his head stands out against the background pretty well now. I may clean up the edges a little bit more a little bit later, maybe pull a few more highlights, but so far so good. And now I'm working on this jacket or whatever he's wearing. It's some kind of a leather armor, I think, and I'm trying to imitate the appearance or the texture of leather. So some of it is going to appear a little bit shiny with a lot of contrast, and I think I did a nice job on that sleeve of his right hand. I don't really have any specific tips on how you can draw folds in the clothes, other than just try to observe and practice. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that one day. Now I'm moving lower down onto the legs and the stirrups and a little bit of the ground on the left, and these bags on the saddle. This was a fairly complex drawing, I'm not gonna lie. It took hours to do. Most of my other drawings are a lot less complex, but there's a lot of detail here, both on his clothes and on his face, and the horse itself, of course, will be a challenge. And then the background wasn't exactly simple either, because there's lots of trees there, and there are those branches with those clusters of needles, which I had to try to make realistic looking. And these folds in the clothes, especially if you're trying to imitate the appearance of a specific material, in this case leather, they can also be a challenge, but I think that a combination of charcoal and a tortillon make this pretty easy. And even when I worked with graphite, I found that tortillons are very, very useful tools when drawing clothes. They just made things a lot quicker and simpler for me. I'm gonna do a few more tree trunks here on the right as well, and some branches, and I'm laying down some more of that vine charcoal. And the good thing about it is that if I don't like something, I can easily modify it. I can just easily lift up some of it or work over it and just change it. as long as I don't spray it with the fixative. Once it's sprayed with the fixative, if you try to touch it, it'll be ruined. So I just gotta fill in some of that background with irregular shapes. I am just making some suggestions of trees and branches in the distance, nothing too well defined. And one of the things that I have to learn is not to obsess too much about the background, because when you're doing these realistic detailed drawings, you can often be tempted to put too much detail or too much work into things which aren't exactly the focus of your drawing. But on the other hand, if you try to oversimplify something or do something too fast, it may end up looking sloppy and just crappy and ruin the whole appearance of your drawing. So I guess even the background needs a lot of attention. It's just that my general tip is to try to simplify things which aren't the focus of your drawing. So whenever I'm drawing a forest like this and I have a clear subject in the foreground, I'm gonna want to simplify the appearance of the trees and try to create that illusion of depth by adding some of these blurry, less defined trees with lighter value in between, and hope that it'll be enough to kind of trick the eye that our subject is walking, or in this case riding, through a forest. So it's a combination of some details and some blurry parts where you're kind of hoping that these tiny suggestions will create an illusion of detail and complexity. But it doesn't really matter how much you simplify some of the elements. A drawing like this can't really be done in under 5 or 6 hours, just because of the amount of detail and texture and shading that needs to be done on the clothes and on the horse as well. That will also take a little bit of work. Now a few words on the highlights on the clothes, because there are some metal parts there, like that buckle and I don't know, some buttons and things like that. I'm going to try to leave most of them either completely white or try to clean them up with my erasers later, but if I feel like some of them got messed up with charcoal and I can't clean them up, I'm just gonna go and put in a few details with a gel pen, which is what I'm doing here. I think that a little bit of gel pen here and there is fine, and I find that gel pen tends to integrate even better with charcoal than it does with graphite. With graphite it doesn't really look that nice. And now, as you can see, I'm moving on to the horse. And because that part of my reference photo was a little bit darker, here my camera went out of focus, so this part is going to be a little bit blurry. Sorry about that. I'm not exactly using high-tech equipment here, but just to keep commenting on what I'm doing, I am first trying to shade some of these larger areas and establish larger relationships between lighter and darker value, and then once I do that and cover or block in most of the horse, I'll try to go back in and refine the detail. camera refocused, so like I said, sorry that some of my footage is not of very good quality. That happened a lot in the past when I started recording, but I haven't exactly upgraded my equipment too much in the meantime. I just found ways of avoiding those low quality segments or footage. But now I'm in that phase which I mentioned previously, where I did most of the shading and most of these larger areas of lighter and darker value are in place, and now I'm just trying to clean up some of the edges and working on some of the detail and the texture and things like that. I'm going to try to work on these straps a little bit, make them stand out, clean up their edges, do a few highlights on them, and also work a little bit on the anatomy of the horse. The part around the mouth here is still blurry, so I need to refine that and add some more detail. And now I'm adding some veins here on the horse's muscular body. This is the other leg, the other Geralt's leg. And now I'm doing a little bit of that ground on the right. I'm gonna try to simplify that a little bit as well, but also to create some variation in the terrain so that I can create some illusion of detail, like there's a forest, like he's walking in the forest. And I decided to make some parts of this leather shirt that he's wearing a little bit darker. I didn't really like the amount of value in certain places, so I just added a little bit more charcoal on top. And here, as you can see, I'm almost done. I'm just going to sign the drawing. It's already been sprayed with a fixative. I'm going to move it around a little bit so that you can see all of it, and zoom in a little bit so that you can see some more of the detail and the work that I did on the Witcher's face and his equipment. Some of the detail and textures and things like that. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my other videos. And also, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe.